Today I'm going to share something a little more simple and personal, something that's been going on with me over the last few months in my own relationship to Christ. The ancient Christian writers talk a lot about this kind of thing too, so it seems like it's a common experience for people of faith, and I think that talking about it today might help you if you've gone through something similar. Today we're going to talk about what happens when God's just not there. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how Elijah had killed all the prophets of Baal with the sword. So for me, it usually starts with a sincere intention to serve the Lord. I see a new angle on the Jesus story and it really speaks to me, so I make an effort to share it with other people as well as I can. I learn disciplines of daily prayer and how they can purify your soul. So I make an effort to practice them myself every day. The world shuts down and we can't go to church like we used to. And so I make an effort to adapt what we're doing to a digital format to keep the fire lit. Whatever the challenge happens to be, my first response is usually to just work on it until we overcome it. And this is the way that most of us naturally approach our spiritual lives, with effort. We try to avoid sin. We try to read the Bible and study to understand it. We try to pray regularly. We try to attend church as much as we can. If we're involved in church leadership, we try to expand on and improve what the church is doing. We try to raise our children into faithful Christians. We try to obey Jesus' commandment to be charitable and loving to our neighbors and to everyone we meet. We try, and try, not for any other reason than that we're just trying to bring our lives into line with what we believe is good and holy and true. But the thing about effort, even the good, honest effort that we make trying to please God, is that sooner or later, success in our efforts becomes the goal. For pastors, preaching well and looking good while we do it can become the motive for preaching in the first place, or for right now, making videos. The self-satisfaction that comes from understanding the Bible better, or the authority that it gives you over other Christians, can easily become the motive for reading and studying God's Word. Getting what you want from God can become the only motive for prayer. If you're doing spiritual disciplines, we might meditate or fast for longer and longer so that we can feel the satisfaction of becoming more spiritual. We want to see that all of our efforts at church make a difference, that it's worth the time and the money. And so our motivation becomes having a church building and a church organization that we can be proud of. Our desire for a clean conscience motivates our efforts to avoid sin. Our desire to be seen by others as loving and charitable motivates our good deeds. And of course, all of these efforts can be measured. So we can always judge how well we're doing. Am I getting the clicks, the views, the likes, the compliments, the smiles, the answers to prayer, the recognition, the satisfaction, the feelings of closeness with God, or whatever other results will make me feel like all this effort is worth it? Think about it. In your church experience and in your spiritual life, there is some measurement that you are always tempted to use to see how things are going for you. And it's always something that satisfies you. So very quickly, we can forget why we were making the effort in the first place and start to chase better and better results. And this can happen with things as concrete as how well the church is doing, or as personal as how I feel when I pray. Whatever it is, the effort that starts as a sincere desire to serve the Lord is always in danger of turning into the pursuit of our own satisfaction. We set the goal, we do the work, we reap the benefit. And as long as things go the way that we want them to, we feel close to God and like God is close to us. But then things happen that just aren't part of the plan. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, "So may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not take your life like the life of one of those prophets by this time tomorrow." Then Elijah was afraid. He got up and fled for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and he left his servant there. Our efforts don't always give us the results that we want. Maybe one day we don't feel God's presence like we did when we prayed yesterday. Maybe the Bible doesn't feel open to us all of a sudden, no matter how hard we try to read it. Maybe the efforts that we make at church don't pay off. Maybe all the hard work we do teaching others doesn't actually change their lives. Maybe we fall back into a sin that we thought we had conquered. Or maybe, like in my case, a disease that was showing signs of going away comes back even stronger than before. So this is the personal part. I had surgery the first week of February, and I'm actually very grateful that I did, because if we'd set the date for even a week later, I wouldn't have been able to have the operation because it actually counted as an elective procedure. And I would have spent the last 3 months in severe abdominal pain. But I got the surgery, and not only did that problem go away, but my chronic illness, the thing that I've struggled with for the last 8 years, started to retreat. To be completely honest, I've been waiting for 8 years for God to heal me. I've been praying and asking and hoping for the day when I would wake up without signs of the disease, without pain or discomfort. I felt so good after the surgery compared to how I felt before that I thought, like, maybe this is it. And then the shutdown started, and I was feeling so good and I was ready to get to work. We did a daily Bible study for a couple weeks on Facebook. We called each other, we prayed together, and I started working on my video making skills. It really felt like a new opportunity. Even with the anxiety of a virus hanging over all our heads, I was ready to meet the challenge with some effort and come out on top. I had every intention of taking advantage of the new routine and deepening my prayer life. And I really felt like all of that was what God wanted me to do. But about 2 weeks into the shutdown, I started to feel the same old fatigue. The old infection came back. The old pain started again. I couldn't concentrate to study. I was uncomfortable lying down, standing up, or sitting, which you might recognize as all the time. It hurt to eat, so I started eating a lot less, which makes the fatigue worse. And after the last surgery, to be honest, I don't have really all that much weight to lose. And I was sheltered in the house with kids and a wife who just wanted some attention from me. And I had all my plans to really use this time to serve the Lord, but I ended up with no mental focus and no bodily energy to do any of it. Then I had to take 4 courses of antibiotics back to back, and the last one they gave me always makes me feel really gloomy and depressed for a couple weeks, and it certainly did this time. And no, I didn't share much of this with my church brothers and sisters while I was going through it. That's for 2 reasons. The first one is I know I'm not the only one with health issues. And just because I have the microphone doesn't mean that it has to be about me all the time. But the other reason is that I was right in the middle of a wrestling match with God over his will for me, and I really didn't want to include anyone else in it. Like I said, I've been waiting and praying for healing for a really long time. I really felt like this was the moment, and my health was improving, and right when I was ready to jump in and give God all my effort, I got stung with the same soul-crushing weakness of the flesh that's tripped me up for the last 8 years. My intentions, my routine, my prayer life, it was all ruined. And instead of growing and advancing and conquering with all my effort, I found myself struggling just to hang on. During that time, I asked God over and over, is this what you want for me? To struggle in pain and doubt instead of enjoying the work that you've called me to do? I prayed hundreds of times to be made well. I counted, so I prayed hundreds of times. But what I got instead was about a month and a half of just straight pain and weakness. I don't know what situations you've faced that are similar to mine, but what I do know is that in the life of every spiritual person, there are times when our efforts to serve God are blessed, and times when God withdraws his favor from our efforts, and we hit a very solid wall where all our effort stops working. The wall can be shaped like a physical or mental health issue, or a relationship problem, or a financial disaster, or a global pandemic, or simply a terrifying feeling that spiritually things aren't what they were just a few days ago. Unfortunately, we tend to teach each other that if you're really on God's side, all your efforts will go smoothly, and you'll achieve all the spiritual goals that you set for yourself. So when these times of frustration come, we think we're just not trying hard enough, or we're trying in the wrong place. The answer to both seems to be to just try harder. Maybe try something else, but try harder. What we almost never consider is that those walls that we hit might be God telling us that it's time to stop, to give all our efforts a rest, and to just listen to God's voice again in silence. But Elijah himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a solitary broom tree. He asked God that he might die. He said, "It's enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my ancestors." Then he lay down under the broom tree and fell asleep. Suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, "Get up and eat." He looked, and there at his head was a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. He ate and drank and lay down again. The angel of the Lord came a second time, touched him and said, "Get up and eat, otherwise the journey will be too much for you." He got up and ate and drank. Then he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. At that place he came to a cave and spent the night there. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." All the old spiritual teachers talk about dark times when God pulls away from us a little. And it's always to teach us a very simple lesson. The lesson is this: the point of the spiritual life is not to make successful efforts at spiritual things. The point of the spiritual life is only to know God. There are certainly times when effort is necessary to know God. How would I learn to know Jesus unless I read his story? How would I learn to love God unless I learn how to pray? How would I learn to love my neighbor unless I learn how to practice charity? How can I defeat sin unless I fight my demons? But behind all these efforts is the real living God, not the God I make in my mind through study, not the God who should do all the things that I think he should do, not the God that exists in our shared imagination as a church. The real living God. And the living God wants me to know him, so he blesses my efforts to serve him for a while they lead me in his direction. But the living God is not a God who can be known through effort. If I'm going to know the living God, he has to make his presence known to me. And for me to receive that knowledge, my soul has to be quiet. My mind has to be free of ideas. My heart has to be free of desires. My soul has to be free of feelings. I have to know and accept the weakness and mortality of my body. God said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then there came a voice to him that said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." When things are going well, we never volunteer to go to the place of emptiness, of openness, of silence, of humility, where God can be truly known. All our efforts are too noisy and too easy and too comfortable, and they offer too much satisfaction for any of us to just let them go. So sometimes we need a disappointment. We need a failure. We need some kind of disaster. And of course, it feels horrible when God withdraws from our efforts or allows us to suffer. But for spiritual people, sometimes it's the kindest thing that God can do, because it reminds us that we need him, and it empties us of our other drives and motivations so that we're prepared to know God a little bit better. There are ways to chicken out of this process before it runs its course, and I've tried them all. You can hang on tightly to what you know and refuse to listen and learn and grow. You can get mad and live in protest to God's will. You can try to escape your pain and weakness through drugs or Netflix or whatever it is that makes you feel better for a minute. You can complain to others and live off their sympathy. You can find something else besides spiritual growth to give all your effort to. But if you want to know God, sooner or later, you have to let yourself be drawn out into that spiritual desert where all your weakness and helplessness is laid open. You have to face your own powerlessness and realize that all the success that you had when you were trying so hard was not because of your effort. It was actually a gift given to you by God the whole time. And if you do that, you will know deeply that you have always depended on God for life, for breath, for everything that gives life meaning. If God gives you grace, you might even realize that this dark time of doubt and pain is its own kind of gift too. Because with no effort or success to hide behind, with nothing to be or do, your complete dependence on God is crystal clear in your mind in ways that you were afraid to see before. And with your heart broken and your mind silenced and your soul at rest in your own miserable weakness, the presence of God might just brush past you in a dark and terrifying and unknowable cloud. There will be more truth in that moment than in any success, spiritual or otherwise, that you could ever win by your own effort. That tiny little spark of contact with God will be treasured by God and you forever. Because God didn't create you to preach sermons or study the Bible or build churches or tithe. He created you to know Him. And if that is His desire for you, He will take you to the place where you either have to know Him or run away. Run away back to all your efforts and routines where God isn't anymore. I'm not going to tell you what happened to me this time because Jesus said, what your Father sees in secret, He will reward in secret. But I will say that this time, I didn't run. And if you don't run, what comes next, sometimes after quite a while in a dry and painful desert, is consolation. Peace with God and with yourself. Maybe not healing, but at least the strength to face tomorrow's pain. And a quiet, solid hope that, in the words God spoke to Julian of Norwich, all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. Then the Lord said to Elijah, "Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. When you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael as king over Aram. Also you shall anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, as king over Israel. And you shall anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat, of Abel-Meholah, as prophet in your place. Whoever escapes from the sword of Hazael, Jehu shall kill. And whoever escapes from the sword of Jehu, Elisha shall kill. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him." What I want to get across here is that there is a definite pattern to the spiritual life that we need to understand so that we can flow with it. First, your effort to serve and obey God is absolutely necessary, but that effort is not God. The second thing that happens is God might remove some of His presence from you to remind you of your dependence on Him, and to remind you that you were created to know God, not just do things. The next step is that to learn this lesson, you will have to find a way to rest in your own weakness and in God's unknowable mystery. And the last step is if you don't run away from the challenge, God will soon comfort you with peace and strength. The most important thing to know is that all of these steps have an important place in your growth as a spiritual person. Knowledge and discipline and effort, confusion, weakness and failure, all of these things are used by God to conform you to the image of Jesus Christ and to bring you into His own presence. And that presence is not in the thunder or the fire or the earthquake of success. It's the still, small voice of silence, out past your knowledge, and out past your desire, and out past your feelings, and out past all your effort, out in the desert where you would rather not go. But where God takes you, to dry you out and to realign your heart and remind you of everything that He is and everything that you are not. So I want you to know that it's okay to have times of spiritual dryness and doubt. And it's okay to rest in God during those times, to keep silence and to listen. It's all part of your growth. So just go with it. And remember that peace is coming soon until Christ is formed in you.